welcome back to another video here on Freewheel Photos. Today we're going to be doing some retouching to a product shot that I took using my Canon EOS R and my 50mm lens as well as a flash. Now you can get photos just like this using almost any camera and any lighting setup, but what happens is the photo gets a little washed out. So we're going to bring back some of that contrast, bring back some of that specific area detail, and really make the product look a little bit better, so that way we can use this in whatever type of scenario we need to. Now, if you aren't a product photographer or shooting things that are product centric or related, then still stay tuned, because this is a great tutorial teaching you how to use the tools inside of ON1, so that way you can start to manipulate your images the way that you would want to. So here we are inside of Photo Raw 2024, and this is what I would call the final edit, or at least the final look. Now, this is what we came into the editing bay with, and this is what we created. Now, I will note, I'm not going to go over the develop settings. I did use Brilliance AI, but I understand that a lot of people are getting different mileage with this, and I'm going to work on a completely separate video explaining how I'm using Brilliance AI, and hopefully it'll help you use Brilliance AI as well. But for today's content, all we're going to do is stay focused on the local adjustments tab and the effects tab. Now, I'm going to jump over to a snapshot that I created earlier, which is just the starting point. And what this is ON1 Photo Raw, Brilliance AI already applied. And so if I go before and after, you can kind of see what it's doing here. Now, what I will note is I did add a little bit of contrast over here in tone and color. And I say a little bit, I really mean quite a bit. And that's something to pay attention to for your own photos, but that's the only thing that I want to mention over here in tone and color. Let's go ahead and jump back over to the local adjustments tab. And actually, before we go there, let's go over to the effects tab, and we're going to add a lens blur. Now, this is a tool that I personally enjoy using to help bring focus to the areas of an image that I really care for. Obviously, the star of this image is this bottle of lotion. So we're going to go ahead and pull up on the amount quite a bit until I get the blur around the bottle about where I think it should be. You can always come back and remodify this. And there are a lot of ways that you can use the lens blur tool, but my favorite way is by using a vignette masking or a radial gradient. So I'm just going to put it on vignette, and I'll leave it on center, so that way it cuts a hole right into the center of my mask. And that's actually a really good way of remembering where do you want your radial gradient to cut. Do you want it to cut to the center of the mask, which means that it's going to cut out that area, or do you want it to cut out the edges of the mask, meaning it's going to not show the effect in that area? Hopefully that made sense. Let me know in the comment section if I kind of botched that, but nonetheless, I'm going to use the radial gradient here to kind of shape this the way that I want. And what I like to do is come right onto the insides of the actual product here. And then I'm just going to rotate this and push this up like so. And maybe even feather this out just a little bit more so it looks more natural. And you can mess around with this however you see fit. But I think that this looks pretty good for what I'm going for today. And the reason why I do this, and we'll fix a portion of this over here, because I don't want those letters to be blurry. In fact, maybe we'll just make this a little bit wider and then pull this over, rotate it like so. Because I'm okay if like the back end of this G is a little blurry, but I don't want the main letters or the beginning letters of the main title here being blurred out a little bit. Okay. So what we're going to do here is now darken down everything around it. And this is why I enjoy using the lens blur. If you have been a viewer of the content here on the channel, you know that I use a lot of darkening effects. I just enjoy doing that. That's my own personal signature editing style. But the lens blur tool here, it allows us to pull down and kind of darken everything around. And you can see how that's really just starting to bring our eyes right into the bottle in a very natural way. And this is the reason why I just love using this particular tool, especially on shots like this where there's only one main subject and it's easy to kind of pick out what the person is supposed to be looking at. And then that lens blur just helps modify that look a little bit more. Personal preference. Let me know what you think about the lens blur tool down in the comment section below. So now that I have my lens blur where I want it to be, it's time to come over to the local adjustments and really start modifying this particular image. So the first thing I'm going to do is add an adjustment, and I'm going to change my adjustment blend mode. So I'm going to hit this little gear icon, and I'm going to change this over to soft light. Now, I work in soft light whenever I do my burning effects, so to speak. And this just helps me with really honing in on making the product look the way that I want it to, or getting the right look. Now, I'm going to leave my exposure down pretty low, -1 or -1 stop, and I can modify that later if I so choose. But what I'm going to do is pull up on my opacity till I'm about 70% because I'm going to use my perfect eraser now, or I'm sorry, perfect brush. You can access this by hitting Command and R, or you can just click it like I'm going to do here. And with a relatively reasonable size brush, I want to click on the inside where this blue area is. So let me get my Z key. Let's zoom in here just so that way it's easier for us to see what's happening. And I'll just pull this down to the center of the monitor. So now if I come back to my brush tool, and I can now go ahead and just click one time inside of here, and you can see how it's darkening just the things that are the same color as the inside of my label here. And I'm not touching the white, which, or I guess I'm going over it, but it's not impacting it. And this is how I like to darken down my labels, and especially if there's a color separation. Now, sometimes there are labels that have colors that are very similar, but I want to get my label to look darker and really separate the text and not make this look so washed out, because the lighting that I used kind of washed over it, and it's just not very contrasty or edgy the way that I would prefer this bottle to look. Now, if you're working with a client, I will note that you want to make sure that you are delivering a product that meets the client's intent. But usually whenever I do this for a client, they don't really care because I'm not modifying the color scheme entirely. Instead, what I'm really doing here is just making the product look a little bit more appealing to a consumer. Now, once I get done doing all of that, let me show you what I just did here. If I hit the letter O, you can see I've essentially masked that entire area in, and I did it quite easy. Missed a little bit over here, but that's okay if I did. And I know that it's spilling out over here, and I can come back and clean that up. But using the perfect brush, I was able to just click around and really fine tune what this label looks like. Now, I also want to get this label down here, but I'll probably do that on a separate adjustment. So we'll leave that one alone for now. But I do like how this is starting to give me like a gradient over the top here that says oatmeal. But I'm just going to go ahead and make this all a darker color so that way it pops. because I am going to come in and make modifications to the overall bottle here in a little bit. So as long as this makes sense, let's hit the letter O. Yeah, I think I can get this L a little bit better. There we go. So now that all looks good, and what I could do here is just grab my brush tool, or I'm sorry, turn off my perfect brush, make this a little bit smaller, hit Shift X to go with paint out, and then I can just go ahead and paint this away from this area if I'm concerned that this is going to cause problems. I don't think that that will for this adjustment, because I think I've already gotten the darkest level of adjustment that I needed to make, or at least the burn adjustment that I needed to make for this particular effect. So if I hit the letter O, and I'm just going to turn this off and on so you can see what's happening here. Off and on, you can see how it's just making this little area pop a little bit more. Now, I could do the same thing down here, but again, I'm going to call this top lab, and then we'll do it again. Again, blend mode, change this over here to soft light. Now, power tip, what you can do if you find that you're always working in soft light on a local adjustment is you can change the blend mode and then come over here to the more drop down, come all the way down to the bottom and click save style. And then I'm going to call this soft light burn. And I like to put FWP in front of all of my styles, so that way I know that this is a custom style that I made personally and it's not from anywhere else. So now whenever I create, I'm just going to go ahead and close this one out. I'm going to hit add adjustment here, and then I can come to more, and then I can find FWP soft light burn. Now pay attention to what happens over here in the properties. I'm going to go ahead and hit soft light burn. And then if I come over to blending, you can see that it's already set to soft light and it's at my -1 exposure, which I'm okay with. That's the default that ON1 gives us. So now what I can do is come in here, turn on my perfect brush, make my brush size a little bit larger, and just start clicking through here. And the reason why I typically modify the top label, and I am just clicking right now because for me, I find that that helps me get a better selection. You can click and drag as I'm doing right now, but what you want to do is keep the crosshair, the center portion of your brush, over the color that you want to actually modify. Because if you go over the white lettering here, you're going to mess around and get some dodge, or I'm sorry, some burning effect on there. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint through all of this, and I'll fast forward this portion because I know that this is not as entertaining to watch. Okay, so it looks like I got a pretty decent selection over here, but I went a little bit above into the top layer here. So again, Command R just to deactivate my perfect brush, and then I can go to a paint out. I still want that feather to be at 100%. Shift X to paint out, and then I'm just going to paint away from this area up here, and I'll pull the feather down so that way I can just, it'll work more like an actual eraser. So it's 100% erasing as I go over those areas. And I'm not going to make this entirely perfect for the tutorial's sake, but just know that this is the technique. And, you know, the whole point of me showing these things on my channel is to help you see techniques that you can use in your own editing style or your own photos. Please don't try to replicate everything that I do. Understand the technique and then apply the technique to your photos as best you can. And if you run into questions, then please let me know, because I am more than happy to answer questions and help you identify how you can use this tool to do the things that you want to do without copying exactly what it is that I'm doing where it's applicable. All right. So now that I have that set, what I may identify is, well, maybe I want to darken this one a little bit more compared to the other label. Now, you got to be a little careful. In fact, this one may be a good candidate for a dodge, just so that way there's this separation between the two labels. And I'll have to clean this area here up, by painting over it and figuring out a way of getting rid of that discoloration. But for the most part, I now have two labels that are modified. So we'll call this bottom label. So now it's time to modify the bottle itself. So I'm going to hit Command and 0 just to zoom us back out. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Adjustment. Click on my mask icon here. Actually, I'm going to pull up on the exposure, and I'll even push the highlights just a little bit, and maybe even a little bit of, actually, we'll push the midtones. Yeah, just a little bit, because the bottle is already a pretty light color, and it's reflecting light pretty well, but I want to be able to get more of the bottle to really start building that contrast again. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn on my perfect eraser by hitting Command and R. I'm going to make a fairly large selection here, and I'm going to put my feather all the way back up to 100. I'm just going to click, and you can see how this is just revitalizing the bottle. Now, the good news here is I don't have to go like crazy overboard with this effect. I only need to make it perceivably brighter. All right. So areas where it should have shadows, like down back over here, I will actually make a smaller brush and just kind of come in here and make those shadows, like loosen up those shadows. And this is the other reason why I'm working at a 70% opacity, because I don't want this to just be an overpowering adjustment, but I want this to be bright in the areas that it should be bright, which are more on the top of the bottle and this left side, because that's where the rim light would have been. So I'm just going to click through here and make these adjustments as appropriately as I can. And I'm not going to worry too much about the top of the bottle, because there's not that much detail that's worth calling out or indicating. So I'll leave that to be its own thing. If I hit the letter O, you can see where I went ahead and made these corrections, these dodges, if you will, and I'll just get that portion of the bottle so that way things look even. But it's not like a whole bottle adjustment. All right. And there's even segments in here that I may want to clean up just a little bit, because I don't want too much banding. And this is kind of the challenge of working in the click method that I'm working on, but I'm okay with that because I think it still yields a pretty good result overall. So if I come back over here and I turn this adjustment off and on, you can see maybe I should come down just a little bit lower, just so that way it looks a little bit more even overall. But I don't think I need this portion here. So I'm going to hit Command R again and go Shift X. I'm just going to paint this away from this area, because it doesn't really need to be there. I don't think it adds anything to the image. So I'll do something like that and call it good. And then we'll call this Bottle Bright. Okay, so now we have our three adjustments. And again, this is what we came into the editing bay with. This is where we are so far. And I think this is starting to look pretty good. There's one more thing that I will do to this particular image, and that is make these little leaves, I guess. I don't know what this would be, but whatever. This plant that's brown, we're going to make that kind of stand out a little bit more on the bottom. So I'm going to hit add adjustment, and you probably have already guessed it by now, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. This time, I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm going to click paint with color, and I'm going to sample this darker color right here. I'm going to go ahead and click there, and I'm going to change my blend mode over to color because I don't really need to modify the light. Oh, let's click blend mode, and then I'm going to come down to color because I don't really need to modify the light. I just want to modify the color in the areas where it's a little bit washed out and doesn't look so good. So what I'm going to do is turn on my perfect brush. And then for this, I will zoom in. So I'm going to hit Command plus one time. That brings us right in on the image. I'll go ahead and make my brush size just a little bit smaller or larger. And when I click, you can see that it's just adding to the image here. And I'm going to go 100% on this. And it's just revitalizing those areas that may not have been well colored. And I could probably change my sample color if I needed to. But I think I got a pretty good color here. We'll just keep clicking through to get this whole thing, or at least portions of it, highlighted pretty decently. And then what I'm going to do, because again, the light is still hitting this, so it's going to be brighter than these over here, but they still look a little washed out, and that's not cool. So I'm going to come to classic and see if we can modify this in a way. Let's see if saturation helps us out a little bit. Okay, that helps us a touch. We'll go with some vibrance maybe. And, you know, this is all just playing with it to figure out what will work. Maybe pull down on the blacks just a touch here. And maybe we'll change our blend mode. Instead of it being color, wonder what normal will give us. Nope, don't want that. We'll stay with color because I think that this is working pretty well. Just trying to revitalize a little bit. Now, one of the things with this mask could probably use some feathering just to help it blend a little bit better. So if I hit the letter O, you can see it's kind of just spreading over all of those areas. Whereas if I don't have any feather, it's just kind of, you know, all over the place. But when I feather it, it just helps it blend, in my opinion, a little bit better. Let's hit Command and 0 to zoom out. So here is, oh, let's see if we can get this to, there we go. Here is the before photo, and here is the after photo, which now looking at it, I think that the brightness effect can come down a little bit more because that looks a little bit more appropriate. Now, the last thing that I'll do in this particular image is apply some form of a color grade. So remember, there's this idea of this oatmeal brown tone type of thing, but there's these blues as well on the bottle. So what I'm going to do is come to split toning and see if I can do something. I know oats sometimes could work. Warm, nope, that's not going to work. So we're going to do our own thing. I'm just going to go ahead and click here. We're going to make something just a little bit brighter, but we're going to go more in the red, orange range. Maybe something around here. Maybe, we'll see. And then we'll come over to the highlights and we'll do something a little bit darker, but we're going to go with a complementary color. So we'll come over here to the blues because again, I want to keep the same uh, style colors, if you will, that were already in the product. All right. And this is purely experimental, by the way. You got to play with it for your own images, but just looking at it, I think maybe this will work. So when I say complementary colors, I mean colors that are on opposite sides of the spectrum. Those are typically your complementary colors, and they usually work pretty well together to make a combination. Now, if I turn this off and turn it on, doesn't quite look the way that I want it to. I wonder if I need to change my blend mode over to color as well, which I do kind of like the way that it looks with color, but this definitely needs a better balance, I think. And I think I warm it up a little bit by pulling it to the left. So that way the shadow tones are really kind of being the champion here. But I do need those blue tones to come out. Maybe we need to work the balance just a touch here. Okay, so maybe it's actually an issue of opacity. So let's let the underlying layer kind of shine through. And this may be a good look overall. There's like a really, really gentle style that's going over this particular image now with the split tone tool here. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can kind of see what it's doing. Haven't I haven't changed the overall look of the product to make it unbelievable, but this is something that could fit, with a campaign, especially if I save this and I apply this over a line of products that this particular product is from. So hopefully you found some value in this particular content. I know it's not the typical thing that I show on the channel, but my goal here is to show that ON1 Photo Raw can be used to do a lot of different things, and you can edit genres of photos, not just landscape, portraits, and other things that the ON1 team kind of showcases. Those are usually a little bit easier to get to, but you can do some product work inside of ON1, and I've used it in the past for product work as well. So it does work. Hopefully this is a decent enough showcase that that works. Let me know what your comments or your questions are in the comment section. And until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.